Hey, it's Alan. Welcome to this very special episode of Pipeline to Profitability. Today, I have my very dear friend Mark Matteson, and this is not the first time we've done podcasts together. Mark's been on my previous episodes of Pipeline to Profitability several times now. I always love the time that I spend with Mark. Mark adds massive value to everyone that he gets in front of. And just a little bit about my friend Mark. Mark is an inspiring speaker and the author of international bestseller Freedom from Fear. For over 20 years, Mark's positive humor and peak performance tools have impacted organizations around the globe, igniting personal and professional success for tens of thousands of people. Mark's clients include Microsoft, Honda, GE, ConocoPhillips, John Deere, Honeywell, T-Mobile. When you schedule Mark, his high-powered, high-entertaining message will be tailored to your specific group. Your audience will enjoy the takeaway messages you want to hear. Mark will leave your people feeling encouraged, energized, and empowered. They will feel good about the event, and they'll feel great about the future. So welcome, Mark. And so today, I really just want to add as much value as possible to all my contractor friends and to help them navigate through these difficult times that are approaching us.
Well, I appreciate you having me on this podcast, Alan.
My pleasure.
It's always great to see you, my friend. And my mom wrote that bio. She loves me.
God bless you, Mum. Yeah, so we are heading some challenging times, but it doesn't need to be. And I mean, we've been around the block for a few years, and we've been through these difficult times before. So, what would you encouraging words would you like to give to not just our listeners, but everyone that is trying to get their service company to the next level in these current times?
Well, Ron Smith is an old friend of mine. And years ago, I convinced him to write a book called HVAC Spells Wealth. And he contends, and I believe with all my heart and soul, that the road to wealth is paved with service agreements. And when you think about the way contractors make money, it's really kind of a flywheel. There's three elements to it. There's add-on replacements, there's repairs, and there's service agreements. And round it goes. And in a down economy, right, repair revenue goes up, add-on replacement revenue goes down. In a boom economy, add-on replacements go up and repair go down. But the one constant is the service agreement, because the technician or the plumber is in the house on a regular basis and they're building the relationship. And I really believe that turning your technicians into salespeople, turning your plumbers into salespeople, is a fantastic way to not only build that service base, but also increase your revenue without increasing overhead. And as you know, Alan, I was a technician for 10 years. And my third year of my apprenticeship, I sold more service agreements than the guy they hired full time. And my boss said, I can't get anybody to sell like you do. I need you to come into the office. And that's how, and I got started selling because I set a really simple goal. My wife was pregnant. We had a house, the mortgage payment, and I wanted to augment my income. So I took a 3x5 card and I wrote, sales is fun and easy for me. And I put that on the dashboard of my service truck, and I said that every day, like 5-10 times a day for like a month. And a couple of things happened. See, first we work on goals and the goals work on us. I stopped listening to an extensive blues collection I had, and I started listening to audio programs while I drove around. I called it Windshield University. And back then it was cassettes, right? Then CDs. Now, of course, now it's Audible. I started keeping a journal. And then I found a book by Dale Carnegie at a garage sale for 50 cents. Entitled How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I kept that in my service truck and I read it every single day. And one day I was changing a 5-ton compressor in a building in downtown Seattle. And the guy was complaining about the cost of the repair. And I said, yeah, only the good die young. And he said, excuse me? And I said, well, this never should have happened. It was only 4 years old. But the problem is you've got 9 other units in the same condition. See, the problem is, Mr. Building Owner, you didn't do any maintenance. The filters are plugged solid and collapsed. The belts are broken. The condenser's plugged solid, full of crud. But I said, that's not the worst thing. I said, these other 9 units are waiting to die. You're going to see me on a regular basis. And he said, well, what are you suggesting? I said, look, it's your building. You do what you want. But if this was my mother's building, what I'd say is, Ma, you got to let me clean the coils, replace the filters, change the belts. Whatever it costs for me to do that's going to be more than made up in extending your equipment's useful life and lowering your operating costs. And just then my pager went off. And as you remember, Alan, pagers we called them beepers. And I looked at it and I said, I've got to get to a payphone, like Superman. And the guy said something that changed my life. He said, I'll take it. I said, I'm sorry, what is it you're going to take? He said, whatever it is you're selling, write it up. I said, no, I'm not really in sales. He said, the heck you're not, write it up. Huh. Now, I didn't know what it was, but he wanted it up. So I went back to the shop to talk to the sales guy. And of course, he was gone. He was golfing or water skiing, whatever sales guys do. And I went into my boss's office, best manager I ever worked for. He was on vacation. So I went through the files, found 5 buildings similar in size and scope, added them up, divided by 5, and came up with a number. And it seemed a little low, so I added 50%. I figured if I was going to get fired, it was on a high margin project. And I took it back to the guy the next day, and he signed it without even looking at the price.
Wow.
And I threw it on my boss's desk a week later, and he goes, what's this? I said, it's a service agreement. He said, who told you could do that? I said, the customer. He said, good answer. And he got out a calculator and he went, 65% gross profit. He said, how did you do that? I told him what I'd done. And he said, that's pretty clever. He said, never do it again, unless you run it by me first. And then he gave me a high five.
Fantastic.
Now, when I think about that story, Alan, a couple of things are important. Number one, every single sale has 4 elements: trust, relationship, competency, and timing. If you don't trust somebody, you're not going to buy because you don't believe them, right? If you don't like them, you're not going to buy. It's all about the relationships. If you're not competent, fix it right the 8th time is your motto, you're going to struggle. And finally, timing, right? And if one of those legs is missing, the sale doesn't happen. But here's the secret sauce in that story. It was all about the technician saying, this is what I would do if it were me, but it's your house, it's your building, you do what you want. And the magic's in the detachment. It's almost like I don't really care, but you do care. Obviously, you're offering solutions, but you're also, the customer is saying, what do you think, doctor? And a lot of technicians and a lot of plumbers and a lot of electricians, they underestimate the significance of their own skill level, their own point of view, if you will. See, I believe in service agreements. I believe in maintenance. I think you should change the oil in your car every 3,000 miles because every car I've had for 300,000 miles, right? So I believe in it. And you can't sell or transfer that belief to somebody else unless you own it, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I just want to jump in for a sec because, Mark, I think, actually, I don't think, I know that the subject of service agreements is one that I've spent a lot of time on in the last few months. And I actually did a fantastic podcast last week with Billy Stevens, who is the Billy Stevens was the founder of Berkey's, the Wrench Group. Now he owns a software product called Sira, which you're going to hear about because it's taken on the world, and an amazing company in Dallas called Billy Go. And something that me and Billy have been discussing a lot is service agreements. We actually didn't do much in service agreements back in Australia, but we had club memberships, and a service agreement is basically, you got an air conditioning system. It needs tune-ups done, and you're booking in, to go twice yearly, maybe for the heating and for the cooling. Whereas with plumbing and electrical, we found that memberships worked really well, and we kept the price low. We had thousands of these. We took on what we learned from our mutual friends at Service Roundtable. We built a service agreement, maintenance plan. We called ours the home protection plan, where the customer would pay a low fee every year, but they'd get 15% discounts. They'd get priority service calls. 1 or 2 inspections a year. And it was an amazing way to stay back in front of our customers. And so there is a lot of content that I'm not just put in my training with Service Success Academy, but in other podcasts. And I think it's fantastic. I love also that you talk about the 4 legs of sales. And you're absolutely right about developing trust with the customer. They've got to like you, although I don't think being liked as high on the list as trust. There's nothing like, if you haven't got, if the customer doesn't trust you and your company, doesn't matter whether they like you or not. So,
well, that's why I had that as the first one.
I know you've given some great points on that. And I'd like to actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to stay on this topic, because I think any idea or ideas that we can give to our podcast listeners, and our audience is much the same. We're in the home service space, plumbing, electrical, air conditioning. So any value that we can give our listeners on how to really drive their business forward over the coming 12, 18 months, however long, the economy is going to slow down. I think that's great. So back to you, my friend. You're an amazing man when it comes to knowledge and what's actually happening in the industry, and love to hear some more.
Well, yeah, as you know, Alan, the number one issue is finding good people. And but there's a piece to that we forget, and that is keeping the people that you have.
Oh, yeah.
Now, every single employee is asking 3 questions, whether they realize it or not. Is this company safe? Do I feel safe here? Number 2, do I belong? Is there a sense of family? And number 3, do I have a future? And if there's any hesitation or the answer is no to any of those 3 questions, they're going to eventually leave. And they don't leave for $1 more an hour across the street. They leave because they don't feel safe, they don't feel like they belong, and they don't feel like they have a future. And so the challenge lies with contractors is making sure that you keep the people that you have first, and then turn those people into salespeople to help you get more of the people, cousins, friends, colleagues, coworkers, people from their past.
Yeah.
The most successful contractors I've worked with have a SPIF program, and it comes in a couple of different forms. One company does $200 a month. So I refer you, let's say you're my cousin Louie, and Louie comes to work for the company. I get $200 a month for every month that Louie stays, and until Louie leaves or the company is sold or whatever. The second potential option, one of my clients has a $15,000 SPIF. They get $7,500 to bring someone in, and then if they stay for 90 days, they get another $7,500. And that seems like a lot of money, but it's not when you think about if you can continue growing your business and selling, and you can't get the people to deliver what you sell, right? So that's another piece that nobody talks about, and I don't know why. But I've been talking about it lately in my talks. I was in Houston last week talking to the good folks at Daikin, and I talked about that. Is it safe? Do I belong? Do I have a future?
Love it. Great topic, Mark. And yeah, look, you've hit on another area that is really getting a lot of attention, is not just retaining staff, but getting new staff to come on board. And I just you've mentioned the word sales a few times, and this is an area that I've spent quite a lot of years, like you have, in sales, and there's debate whether we're born as salespeople or whether it's a developed skill. I believe we're all born as salespeople. I mean, when we were babies, if we yelled and screamed loud enough, mummy would come and give us whatever it was that we wanted. So we are born as salespeople, and we're all in sales whether we like it or not. But this one, and I'm going to come back to the retention and the acquiring of new staff, is a lot of companies actually, they get it wrong when it comes to not just bringing in new staff, but keeping staff. And look, I think we overcomplicate it with the way that we operate our business. But I really have to say, that's one hell of an incentive your fellow contractor has put in place, But we did a very similar thing back at our companies. Was we found that the best staff that ever came into our companies were the ones that were referred by our current staff. When they recommended someone to come in, it was always a better team member, and we would put incentive in front of that, at like you mentioned, to actually to encourage them to bring it on, bring them on. But yeah, bringing in the right people, retaining the right people to get us, to get our business navigating through the upcoming challenges is a very interesting one. But in regards to the sales, most technicians, you know this yourself, and you've worked with me in Australia quite a few times now, most technicians didn't get into plumbing, electrical, air conditioning to sell. And that's where I say, well, hang on. You didn't get into this to sell. Well, that's fine. Don't sell then. Let's just go out, do the full home inspection, give the customer options and solutions. You don't have to, because customers love to buy. No one likes to be sold, right? It's simple when you think about it. But, most plumbers don't want to sell. That's fine. Don't. But don't not give the customer a solution to the problem, as like your story to you, that you shared. You didn't go into that call trying to sell the guy anything. He asked you, what should you do? And you gave him options, right?
Well, and there's the other challenge with what you're talking about is if you have 10 technicians, there's going to be 2 who are going to sell 80%.
Yeah.
And there's going to be 2 who will never sell anything no matter how much training you do. But what you're interested in is the 6 in the middle, trying to bring 1 or 2 or 3 of them up. And spend time with people who deserve it, not who need it. So you spend extra time, attention, and spiffs with your top producers. Now, you give everybody the tools to succeed, but some folks are just never going to do that no matter what you do. And that's fine. But you have to reconcile that in your own mind, that you're never going to stop trying to bring those bottom 2 guys up. They're just not going to change their behavior. And that's fine. That's totally fine.
Mark, we had a really good solution to that worked well for us. See, sometimes the bottom, look, this is what I learned earlier in the piece. The bottom, let's say the bottom 20%, the guys that don't want to sell, they can sometimes be your best technicians. They might have the highest technical skills, where they can throw an air conditioning system in record time, or a water heater, or whatever it is. But if you pair those guys with the guys that like to sell, it's a powerful combination. And that's where we found, most of my training is in contractors who want to add drain cleaning. And sometimes the technician that runs the call and clears the drain might be happy just to give the customer a couple of solutions, and then you put the camera down the drain, you uncover problems, but I don't want to sell the customer a solution because it's way too much money. Well, okay, that's fine. Let's bring in the senior technician who can come in, and he can work with you and the customer to give the customer the best solution that fits their budget. So there is a win-win in everyone in your company, except for the guy with the bad attitude. He doesn't fit into any company. But if you've got the people with the right attitude, and that's the other thing I noticed too, the guys that really were the best sales guys sometimes have the least skills, the technical skills. So they needed to be paired with the guys, the technicians with the high technical skills. You want to maybe expand on that, because that's my observations of owning multiple companies down under.
Absolutely not. I want to move on to the next subject because we're going to run out of time. I think we beat that horse to death. Let's talk about something else. Let me talk about one thing that contractors don't think about when they're trying to grow their company. If you have 9 pounds of coffee in a 5-pound can, you're going to stay stuck. And what I mean by that is this. The fish tank principle is a simple one. A fish only grows to the size of the tank and no larger, depending on how many other fish are in the tank. A contractor who's doing $2 million a year and he wants to get to 5 but he's in a $2 million building. The first thing he has to do is find himself a $5 million building and move into a larger space. Then he can grow the company. And nobody talks about that. Well, almost nobody. I do. And a few of my friends. And so the challenge lies in taking the risk and the leap of faith and getting a bigger building. And I've just seen it over and over and over again. And so that's something else that's holding contractors back from realizing their potential, is get a bigger building, the fish tank principle.
And that also goes with thinking too. If you're a $2 million company and you want to be a $5 million company, and you hang around with other contractors that have built a $5 million company, it's the same as the premise, isn't it? Like, your thinking has to change. And this is whether it was you that taught me, or whether it was Matt Michelle, or who, all the great trainers I brought down under taught me that it's the people that you associate with are the ones that are going to challenge your thinking. And there's another fella that I've met. I forget his name. He's tall like you, and he always says to me, Alan, it's the books you read and the people you meet. I forget who was that.
That's me.
You? Okay.
That's the name of my podcast, Alan. Mark Matteson on Books and People. You'll be the same guy in 5 years, except for two things: the people you associate with and the books that you read. So who are you hanging around and why? And is it okay? And what are you reading and why? And is it okay? And is that in alignment with where you want to be in 5 years? So I got to tell you another story, because I know we're running out of time, but I want to hammer this one home.
You're good, my friend.
All right. When I was 32 years old, I accepted a sales position full time, and I went to Pittsburgh.
Not that long ago?
Well, yeah, long time ago. Back then I had long hair. Now I'm longing for hair. So, so I go to this sales training, and mind you, I'd been a technician for 10 years. And I remember having the audacity to think, I want that guy's job. At the end of the first day, I wanted to be Dan O'Hara, right? And so it sat in my subconscious for a couple of years. And then 2 years later, I read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I sat down and I wrote down my life in 5 years. And I took the lid off the container and I changed the size of my thinking. And I wrote ridiculous things like best-selling author, international speaker. I'm friends with all these famous people I listed. And I typed it all up and I laminated it and I put it in the man cave shower. And I read it every day for 14 months. And then we moved, and it ended up in a box, and I didn't see it for like 5 or 6 years. And my wife said, hey, we need to clean out that garage. And so I did, and I found it, and I read it, and it was exactly the life I was leading. I had just written Freedom from Fear. I'd launched a speaking business. Everything changed. So what I tell contractors is, look, sit down and think about your life in 5 years. Where do you want to be? How much money do you want to make? How large do you want to be? How many service agreements? What kind of gross and net profit? Top line sales, everything, right? But more importantly, the why as well. Why do you want this? In 2003, I was the closing speaker at the Radiant Panel Association in Sacramento. And there was a guy named Dan Holohan who was the opening speaker. And I'd read articles he'd written, and he was somebody I really looked up to because he'd written 5 books. So I walked out, he was doing a pre-show book signing. And so I walked up and introduced myself. And he said, hey, have a seat. He said, well, you got a book, right? We'll sell some of your books. We'll get to know each other. We'll just chat. And I said, great. So, and this was, let's see, that book, Freedom from Fear. So I said, what drives you, Dan? What's your big why? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, nobody's ever asked me that before. He said, I figured out that if I could make a nice living writing and speaking and put 4 girls through college, that would be something. And a light went on in my head, Alan. See, at the time I had one son in elementary school and 2 in junior high. And that became my why, putting 3 boys through college, doing what I loved, writing and speaking. And abracadabra, all these years later, right? So it's not enough to say, where do I want my life to be in 5 years? But you also need to know your why. And an emotionalized reason, proving somebody wrong, for the love of family, something, anything that's going to drive you. But we need to know, as Simon Sinek says, we need to know our why. Because the reasons pull us to the future, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense to me. We become what we think about. and all day long.
Hey, wait a minute. That's the title of my new book. This one over here.
I'm going to hand you over in a second to talk about a book, and it can be a book that you've authored, or maybe it's a book that you're currently reading, because I know, like me, you read a lot of books, and I do this with all my special guests, and you are a special guest, Mark.
Like Little Yellow Bus special? Like, is that what you mean?
Something like that.
Okay, fair enough.
I wish you wouldn't make me laugh so much, but that's good. I have to say we've had a lot of fun together over the years. We met at a Service Nation event down under, as you call it, in Melbourne. The Service Nation international event that no one from friggin' America came. I think it was only a handful that actually bothered to come from the US, but we did a great event in Sydney. I mean, we had about 80 or 90.
Alan, what was the name of the guy? Was it Donald Jackson? Was that his name?
That was David Jackson. He was
Donald Jackson. Was that his name?
David Jackson from Australian Sales Masters.
That guy was fantastic.
He was fantastic. Almost as amusing as you.
Oh, he gave me some great advice, buddy. He goes, Mark, that was a great speech. He goes, now let me tell you a story. He says, I mail books out to my clients, not just my books, but everybody else's books as well. He goes, and I just closed a $50,000 speaking deal. So my advice to you, young man, stop mailing books out to your clients. Now, he dropped that seed in my soil 10 years ago. And during the pandemic, when things got slow and I was just doing webinars and I wasn't traveling, I wrote 2 books, the 2 on the left over here. And I started mailing them out to clients. And what I found out was every 50 books I mailed out, I got 2 speaking gigs.
Wow.
And I went, boom. And that reinforced the notion that I'm constantly amazed at how stupid I was 2 years ago. And the cycle keeps repeating, right? And if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll keep getting what we always got.
Absolutely.
We have to do something different.
This has been fun, mate. So, a book that you're currently reading or that you really want to push to our listeners. And yep, as we think, so we become. Lovely. Mark Matteson.
That's the newest one. And where can they get that? Well, wherever they want to. They can get it on my website, www.sparkandsuccess.net/store, or they can go on Amazon. If they get it from me, I always sign them, and I always throw something extra in there, like a box of window cards or another book. Yeah, and of course, I sign them as well.
Fantastic, mate. Well, thank you, Mark. It's always fun doing a podcast with you. You've got me laughing, and that's great. And I'm sure everyone that's tuned into today's episode of Pipeline to Profitability, brought to you by Service Success Academy, has got some gold nuggets that they can take away. So thank you,
and of
mate.
Course, you're going to ask how people can contact me if they're interested, right?
Let's do this. How can people contact you? I'm going to put it all in the show notes as well, but I know you're busting to tell everyone.
Sure. The fastest and easiest way, because I'm old, is just to call me, 206-697-0454. That's 206-697-0454. You can call or text. You can send me an email. This is ridiculously long. I ask your forgiveness right away. mark.enjoythejourney.matteson, M-A-T-T-E-S-O-N, @gmail.com. That's mark.enjoythejourney.matteson@gmail.com. Or just type my name into Google. It comes up the first 11 or 12 times. I have an electronic newsletter that comes out monthly that's free. I have a podcast, which is also free, and they're all archived on my website.
And appreciate the invite to be on your podcast, my friend. But
Absolutely.
Look, we'll put all of your contact details and then some into the show notes. And thank you again, Mark. And it's always an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Cheers, mate.
Take care. See you, matey.